Imagine standing on the Giza Plateau in Egypt, surrounded by the awe-inspiring Great Pyramids and mysterious megalithic temples. Structures so ancient and powerful that they hold secrets many have yet to truly grasp. This is where we find the key to understanding a puzzle that has intrigued historians and scientists alike, the Sphinx and its surroundings. Have you ever wondered what's really going on with the Sphinx and the pyramids? What makes them so fascinating and enigmatic? The answer, surprisingly, lies in astronomy. But to truly understand their significance, we have to credit a few remarkable individuals, 3 people in particular. First, there's John Anthony West, who passed away in 2018. West was the first to challenge the conventional dating of the Sphinx, suggesting that it could be far older than anyone had imagined. His ideas were inspired by philosopher Schwaller de Lubitsch, who noticed what appeared to be water erosion on the Sphinx, a strange and unexpected finding. West, a passionate amateur Egyptologist, spent much of his life studying ancient Egypt, and he quickly became intrigued by the unusual erosion patterns he observed on the Sphinx, particularly around its base. His curiosity led him to wonder if Schwaller's theory about water erosion was correct. Perhaps there had been massive flooding here long before the accepted timeline. This is where Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, comes into the picture. Schoch took a daring step and, after visiting Giza, became the first geologist to publicly suggest that the Sphinx could have endured over 1,000 years of heavy rainfall. Schoch's research led him to dig deeper into the Sphinx's origins, eventually pointing toward a much earlier date, somewhere around 12,000 to 12,500 years ago, during the Younger Dryas period. This was a time when the Sahara, which is now arid, was lush and vibrant, teeming with rivers, lakes, and even large populations. The climate was drastically different, with far more rainfall than Giza experiences today, enough to cause significant erosion on the Sphinx. This idea challenges the traditional narrative, opening up a whole new perspective on the ancient history of Egypt. Now we come to someone else who deserves mention in this story, Robert Bauval. Robert and I have co-authored several books together, and sadly, he's been battling a severe chest infection for the past 7 years. I believe that in addition to his health struggles, Robert has also felt discouraged by the harsh criticisms of his work from mainstream Egyptologists. But make no mistake, Robert is a genius, and it takes a genius to make the kind of connections he did. He was the first to point out something no one had noticed before. The 3 pyramids of Giza are arranged on the ground in a pattern that mirrors the 3 stars of Orion's belt. Skeptics might argue, well, you can align any buildings with any stars if you try hard enough. But Orion is not just any random constellation. In ancient Egyptian beliefs, Orion represented the god Osiris, and they referred to the constellation as Sahu, recognizing it as the celestial image of their god. So, what's actually being replicated on Earth is not just a random star pattern, it's the belt of a divine celestial being. But there's more. When you consider the precession of the equinoxes, something fascinating emerges. The precise alignment of the pyramids today, just like it would have been when they were first constructed over 4,500 years ago, doesn't exactly match the position of Orion's belt as it was back then. There's a twist. They're not perfectly aligned. However, if you trace the stars back in time, you land at around 10,500 BCE, roughly 12,500 years ago, during the Younger Dryas period. And suddenly, everything aligns perfectly. Orion's belt matches the positions of the pyramids on the ground. This is also the same time that the Great Sphinx, a monument tied to the equinox, was perfectly aligned with the rising sun at the spring equinox. Anyone can test this for themselves. Just head to Giza on March 21st, arrive before sunrise, stand behind the Sphinx, and you'll witness the sun rising directly in line with its gaze. But here's the big question. Which constellation was aligned with the Sphinx? 12,500 years ago, it was the constellation of Leo. And interestingly, the shape of Leo closely resembles the Sphinx itself. My colleagues and I are certain that the Sphinx was originally a full lion, both in body and in head. Over thousands of years, it became damaged and eroded, especially the head. There were even times when the Sphinx was completely buried in sand with only its head poking out. By the time of the 4th dynasty, when the Great Pyramids were supposedly built, the original lion head would have been badly worn down. We believe that's when it was recarved into the head we see today, which Egyptologists claim to be that of Pharaoh Khafra. But the resemblance is weak, though it does wear the traditional Nemes headdress of an ancient Egyptian ruler. We think this is the result of resculpting what was originally a lion monument. It wouldn't have made sense to create a monument for the equinox during Khafra's time, 4,500 years ago, when the Sphinx is clearly an equinox marker. Standing 70 feet tall and 70 feet long, it faces directly toward the rising sun on the equinox. If you were to build such a marker, you'd probably make it in the shape of a bull, since the age of Taurus was when the sun rested in the Taurus constellation during the spring equinox. So why a lion? Again, we believe this connection between the heavens and the earth with the sky mirrored on the ground is crucial. The fact that the Giza Plateau is often debated by Egyptologists only adds to the intrigue. But what can't be ignored is that the key monuments of Giza, the 3 Great Pyramids and the Great Sphinx, are astronomically aligned to a date around 2500 BCE. To me, it seems highly unlikely that this is a coincidence. If you use sky simulation software and look at the sky from that time, you'll see that the Milky Way is incredibly prominent and appears to be mirrored on the ground by the Nile River. We believe that this celestial reflection could be one of the reasons why Giza was chosen as the site for this extraordinary complex. What I want to emphasize is that an astronomical design on the ground, marking such an ancient date, doesn't necessarily have to have been made 12,500 years ago. From the perspective of ancient Egyptians, it would have been important to them 4,500 years ago, and even 8,000 years before that. Using astronomical language and megalithic architecture to memorialize that date on the Giza Plateau is exactly what we think we're seeing, except for one detail: the erosion patterns on the Sphinx. We're confident that the Sphinx dates back at least 12,500 years, and with it the megalithic temples like the so-called Valley Temple. Just to the east and south of the Sphinx lies the Sphinx Temple, which faces directly toward the Sphinx. Though much of the Sphinx Temple has been destroyed, the Valley Temple, attributed to Khafra, is still in remarkable condition. It's an enormous megalithic structure with limestone blocks weighing up to 100 tons each. These limestone blocks were coated with granite, and interestingly, the granite blocks were cut in such a way that they fit into the erosion marks on the limestone blocks, which had already been weathered when the granite was placed. This suggests that the construction is much older than the conventional Egyptological timeline would suggest. Giza is a place of immense significance, and I would never separate the dynastic Egyptians from the Great Pyramids. In fact, they were deeply involved in the construction of the pyramids as we see them today. What I'm proposing, however, is that there were much older structures on the Giza Plateau that were later renovated and enhanced by the Egyptians. The Great Pyramids, as we know them now, are actually a renovation of structures that existed long before. For instance, the Great Pyramid was built around a natural hill, which might have been seen by the ancient Egyptians as the primordial mountain. This suggests that the Sphinx could be far older than we've been led to believe, and the pyramids may have been built to honor a place that was already regarded as sacred. Evidence suggesting that the Giza pyramids are much older than Egypt's 4th dynasty emerges when we look at the history of pyramid construction. The first pyramid, the Step Pyramid, was built about 100 years before the Giza pyramids. Then, during the 4th dynasty, there was a boom in pyramid building, with 3 massive pyramids attributed to Pharaoh Khufu, including the famous Giza pyramids. After the construction of the Giza pyramids, however, pyramid building started to decline, and the pyramids of the 5th dynasty were considerably less impressive than those of the 4th. What makes the Giza pyramids even more intriguing is the fact that they don't contain any internal inscriptions, setting them apart from other pyramids which are filled with hieroglyphs and images. One famous episode in the history of the Great Pyramid occurred in the 9th century, when the Arab Caliph Al-Mamun sent workers to find the pyramid's entrance. After breaking through a wall, they discovered a hidden cavity that led to the internal passages. These passages, like the Ascending Passage and the Grand Gallery, are highly complex and showcase an astonishing level of mathematical precision. The King's Chamber, located at the top of the Great Pyramid, is another fascinating feature, particularly because the sarcophagus found there seems too large to have been brought through the narrow passages, raising questions about both the pyramid's construction and its intended purpose. There's also speculation that the pyramid was built around an even older structure, potentially connected to the subterranean chamber, located 100 feet beneath the base of the pyramid. While traditional Egyptology suggests that the Queen's Chamber was the burial place of Khufu, many believe that the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx might have much older origins. Some theorists propose that survivors of a cataclysm, possibly from the Ice Age, sought refuge in Giza, preserving ancient knowledge about astronomy, construction, and navigation. The ancient Egyptians had a concept called Zipe, referring to an era when the gods walked the earth. This period is considered the origin of Egyptian civilization, and there are king lists that go back as far as 30,000 years, a time considered mythical by many Egyptologists. However, the idea that ancient knowledge was preserved through secret societies, such as the followers of Horus and the souls of Pi and Nekhen, suggests that such knowledge may have been passed down through the ages. This transfer of knowledge eventually led to the pyramid construction of the Fourth Dynasty. While it might seem unbelievable, the idea that this ancient wisdom was passed down over millennia isn't so far-fetched. After all, much like the knowledge of ancient Israel was preserved for 4,000 years, it's entirely possible that the knowledge of the pyramids was transmitted through generation. The mysteries of the pyramids of Giza. Far beyond traditional history, the pyramids of Giza, imposing monuments that have fascinated the world for millennia, still hold many mysteries. Although the official version of history tells us they were built about 4,500 years ago, there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that these monuments may be much older, possibly dating back to a lost civilization far more advanced than we imagine. Astronomical alignment and the Orion Belt. One of the most fascinating mysteries is the alignment of the pyramids with the Orion Belt. The three Great Pyramids of Giza are arranged on the ground almost identically to the three stars of this constellation. For the ancient Egyptians, Orion was not just a star formation, but the image of their god Osiris, symbolizing life, death, and renewal. This alignment is not random. It reflects a deep connection between the cosmos and the earthly world, suggesting that the pyramids were linked to a very advanced astronomical system. Furthermore, when we look at the effects of the precession of the equinoxes, a fascinating curve emerges. The pyramids were not perfectly aligned with the Orion Belt when they were built. However, when we go back in time, around 12,500 years ago, the alignment becomes perfect. This is also the period when the Great Sphinx was aligned with the rising sun during the spring equinox, when, curiously, the constellation of Leo dominated the sky. The Sphinx, which may have originally been a statue with the head of a lion, now reveals itself as a celestial marker, symbolizing power and connection to the universe. Lost knowledge and the pyramids as energy centers. An intriguing theory suggests that the pyramids were not merely tombs, but had a more complex function, possibly as energy centers. Could they have been giant transformation machines or places, dedicated to the study of the heavens and the preservation of ancient knowledge? Many believe that the pyramids hold a secret, the use of deep knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and even physics to serve a function beyond simple funerary construction. The idea of lost knowledge, preserved and passed down through secret societies such as the followers of Horus or the priests of ancient Egyptian religion, could explain the complexity of the pyramids and the astronomical precision involved. This knowledge, possibly transmitted over millennia, could have survived cataclysms and planetary changes, passing from a lost civilization to the Egyptians. Just as the wisdom of ancient Israel was preserved for thousands of years, it is plausible that profound knowledge of the cosmos and construction was maintained for generations until the dynastic era of Egypt. The Sphinx and the secret chambers. Speaking of the Sphinx, we know it also contains mysteries. The erosion at its base, which seems to be caused by water and not just wind, raises the hypothesis that the Sphinx is much older than the official history suggests. Instead of being sculpted in the 4th dynasty as most believe, it could have been an earlier construction, perhaps linked to a more distant time in Egyptian history. This leads us to another fascinating question: the possibility that the Great Sphinx and the pyramids were built upon even older structures. The recently discovered subterranean chamber of the Great Pyramid also raises questions. Some suggest that the pyramid was built over a previous structure, possibly to preserve and protect some type of sacred knowledge. Additionally, new radar and cosmic ray muon mapping technologies could reveal secret chambers within the pyramids, still hidden today. The fact that the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx may have much older origins than previously thought adds further complexity to the history of Giza. The decline in pyramid construction and the pyramids of Giza as renovation. An interesting aspect of the history of the pyramids is the decline in pyramid construction after the 4th dynasty. The pyramids of the 5th dynasty are noticeably less impressive than those of Giza. But looking at the pyramids of Giza, we see something even more intriguing. They may not have been built from scratch, but rather renovated and expanded by later pharaohs. The Great Pyramid, for example, was built over a natural hill, which the ancient Egyptians may have seen as a primordial mountain. This suggests that, long before the 4th dynasty, Giza was already considered a sacred land, a place of great cosmic and spiritual significance. Alternative theories and skepticism. While all these theories are fascinating, they are not without controversy. Many traditional Egyptologists contest these ideas, defending the official version that the pyramids of Giza were built in the 4th dynasty. However, these new discoveries and interpretations require us to look at the past with an open mind and an understanding that history may be much more complex than we imagined. The connection bet.